This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. At the end of the day, I'm just a bloke with a chest freezer in his backyard, and before undertaking anything such as an ice bath, you should consult your health professionals and do your own research. Now, time for the show. Before we get into it, are you ready to level up your mind and body? Mind Over Matter Practice in Victor Harbour is where you go to train your nervous system, not just your muscles. We're talking ice baths, float tanks, saunas, oxygen therapy, and more, all designed to help you master stress and bounce back stronger. Just mention my name, Trav, when you book, and you'll score 15% off any treatment. Check them out at mindovermatterpractice.com.au and start building real resilience today. G'day legends, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cold Exposure Hot Topics Podcast. I'm your host Trav Dittmar, and I'm joined today by Alyssia Rickard-Bennett. Lyss, how you going?
Guys, I'm good. How are you, Trav?
Good. Now it's been, probably 10-15 minutes since the ice bath.
Yeah.
How are you feeling now?
I feel fantastic. Didn't need to have a shower after. Literally just, felt great, feel fine, feel actually energised, which I didn't think was going to happen. So,
beautiful, and that's pretty cool after your first ice bath. Like you went 5 times the amount of time you thought you were going to, and you pulled up all right.
Yeah.
So that's excellent.
Yay, mate.
Beautiful. Now, we're here today to talk about a pretty important topic.
Yes.
And I thought I'd let you sort of introduce that from your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I find this topic not really talked about a lot, or people just don't really know how to talk about it, I think is probably, and how to bring it up is probably the more accurate way of describing it. I think it's affected a lot of people. You just wouldn't even know it. So, in January of this year, I actually experienced a miscarriage.
Wow.
So
sorry to hear that. By the way.
That's pretty much what everybody says. It's an awful thing. There's not really much else that you can say about it. Really, it was an awful thing to go through, and you just feel so isolated. And I thought, well, if this is how I'm feeling and I have the greatest support network in the world, then how are those people that, don't really tell people? Or, I found out I was pregnant and had no idea how many weeks I was until I went to the ultrasound, and I was only 5 weeks and 2 days when I went to the ultrasound, and then started bleeding at about the 6-week mark. But I found out I was pregnant in December, and miscarried in January. But finding out in December, I was about 3 days off of Christmas. So it's the most festive and, drinkable time of year. Everyone's on the piss. It's just that time of year. So for me, rocking up to a family event and being like, oh, no booze for me, when if you know me, I'm a pretty big piss pot. At the best of times, I've been known to drink some boys under the table. So I couldn't really rock up and just go, oh, no, I'm just not having anything to drink. So for me, I shared my pregnancy with my friends quite early, because most people don't really tell people until they've hit the, second trimester, when they're out of the unsafe window, when they're in the safe window. But I didn't really have that option, and I actually didn't really want that option. Yeah. Either. I wanted to be supported by my friends and my family and stuff. So Christmas looked very different. New Year's looked very different. And then actually was able to share my pregnancy with my dad, his partner, and my grandmother, because they all came over in January for a week. Yeah. And because they living in Victoria and me living here, we miss a lot of those big moments together. We don't get to experience that a lot together, unfortunately. But I was so excited to have that intimate moment with them, and got to have it with the 3 most cherished people in my life. So I was never going to shy away from announcing to the people that mattered to me and that I loved and cared about. And, it's not that I went and broadcast it to the world, but looking back on it, I'm very, very thankful that I did tell everybody that I did, because the day after they left Adelaide and went back to Melbourne, I started bleeding. So it happened quite quickly, but I got a really happy announcement week with my family. But then had to go through the experience of 24 hours later, started to bleed, and as a emergency nurse, I knew exactly what that meant. And then came the next, I think it was about 4 to 6 weeks of just terrible mental health, and just dealing with the repercussions of losing a baby.
Yeah, wow. And you're right, it's not a topic that gets talked about in so much detail, and I've got so many questions sort of whirling
Yeah.
around in my mind about it. So we might just go question by
Yeah, and
question if
that's
we
why
can.
I'm here. Like, I want to talk about it and get people asking questions, because I think it's like 1 in 4 women will experience miscarriage, and 20 to 30% of pregnancies within the first 12 weeks will end up in a miscarriage result instead of a full term, and almost half of all pregnancies end in a miscarriage of some point. And a miscarriage is up to 20 weeks, so even in your second trimester, you're not actually safe.
Yeah, not out of the woods.
So that's why I'm sort of here to talk about it. People just don't know how to talk about it, and I'm wanting to bring more light to it.
And, it's so relevant now for me personally. Obviously me and my wife are having a child in July.
Yeah, you're going to have a beautiful baby. Yeah.
Oh, we are.
Very blessed, yeah.
Yeah, and, outside of, like, us having that experience, everyone in our lives is coming to us with different experiences about childbirth and labour and things like that as well. And I learned, I'm 28 years old. And I only learnt the other day about some miscarriages that had happened with some women in my family.
Yeah.
And this is stuff that happened years and years and years ago, and even then you still find out, and it's like, well, I don't know how to talk about this, but also why wasn't it talked about back then too,
Yeah, I'm a very honest and open personality, as you know.
Well and truly.
And as most people know once they meet me. But I think I gave a lot of people a bit of a shock and made people uncomfortable with just how open I was about talking about it. And, after talking about it and trusting people with that sort of information, because it's not something that I should be ashamed of. I didn't do anything to lose that baby. It wasn't my fault. I know of 5 people, not including myself, that have actually gone through a single miscarriage. And within that 5, one of them has gone through 2. 6 people, not including myself, had a miscarriage. Wow. So once I started to talk about it myself, people started to be able to resonate with me with that, and you realise just how many people are affected. So I was like, well, why are we not talking about this on a bigger and safe sort of platform? Yeah,
absolutely. And, one of the things that I think would do this issue a lot of justice is providing clarity around just simply like, does anything contribute to causing a miscarriage? There's the obvious things that we get warned about, but for people like yourself who are just doing the right thing, and it happens.
Yeah.
Is there anything that brings it on, or?
No. So there's been a lot of research that medical professionals and doctors and scientists and things like that within the healthcare field have done, and they cannot pinpoint anything that, causes it. There's so many external factors that could do this or could do that. So even if you do everything right leading up to trying to get pregnant. In my instance, I was not trying to get pregnant. It was the biggest life shock I've ever experienced. Ever. It was a random Sunday afternoon, and I finished work at 9:30, and I got home and I was like, I'll just take a pregnancy test, and it came up positive, and I had my world flip. From the moment that I saw those 2 positive lines, my entire life changed, and I did absolutely everything right. I cut out fast food, I increased my water intake, I tried to eliminate as much stress that I possibly could. I stopped caring about the little things and worrying about the little things. They didn't matter anymore. I was going to be a mum. That was my focus. But, and a lot of women do that as soon as they find out they're pregnant. That's not, unheard of. I'm not, a hero for any of that. That's to be expected. But I did all of the right things after I found out I was pregnant, and I still managed to lose my baby. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can do. The biggest thing is that you cut out alcohol and cut out your stress, but it just might not be on the cards for you at that time. There might be something just genetically that's going on with that embryo that's trying to grow, and one tiny genetic that you have nothing to do with doesn't correlate properly in the growth stage of it, and it basically will self-abort the fetus or the embryo because it's not going to be genetically right. So if something just goes wrong in my uterus trying to grow it will just it can do that. It could be because I wasn't hit in the stomach, but if you did get any trauma to your stomach or anywhere on your body, like, you can end up miscarrying. Even if you do everything right, you can end up miscarrying. And even women who do everything right 6 months up to the point they cut out caffeine, and I did that as well. They cut out caffeine, they cut out alcohol, they cut out all of the bad and scary things that could potentially impact your fertility, and they might get pregnant and they still might miscarry. There's literally no, this is what's caused it. After a while, if you repeatedly miscarry, they will send you sort of off to testing to be like, what's going on? Is it your hormones? Is it your uterus? Because sometimes your uterus can actually reject what's going on, and it can just not be a conducive environment to try and grow cells. So they end up they can send you off for testing through fertility clinics. But long story short, there's no hard and fast answer as to why it occurs. It literally just occurs, which is almost harder to accept because you can do everything right and still end up in the same predicament.
Yeah, well, you set yourself up in that vulnerable moment to experience that joy and to fully appreciate that your life is going to change.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's horrible. It's horrible to think about. And what was that time, I suppose, like for you? Just pinpointing the mental health bit here, because I think it's super important. Like, there was obviously the overwhelm and the excitement at first, and, essentially the what the fuck am I going to do now type thing, which we all
absolutely
go through.
was. It took 48 hours I think it took to actually fully process and accept in my brain. And like I said, switched. I was in nest mode, mum mode. I was in complete and utter just awe of the fact that I was pregnant, because I was never supposed to conceive naturally. I was always going to have problems because of my PCOS. And, it happened, and I was like, well, this is an absolute blessing that came at a really messy time, but also yay. However, losing that baby, it took me a minute to sort of process and get to a darker place, if that makes sense. So when I first started bleeding, I knew what was going on, and I just went, that's not good, I know what that is. But it was a Thursday afternoon, and I said, we'll see how we go over the next couple of days, because earlier on in my pregnancy, very early on after it was confirmed, I had started spotting. But I got my bloods checked every 2 days to see that my beta-HCG hormone was still tracking up, to make sure that I wasn't actively miscarrying. And it was still tracking along, and then I got my scan and it was 5 weeks, and we all thought, okay, it's just a really early pregnancy, so it's probably implantation bleeding. It's not a lot of bleeding, it's just spotting. So we're like, okay, no worries. And then the second round of blood that came was actual, like, blood. And you just know, it was just in my stomach, and I took a couple of days because it was over the weekend, and of course it was over a long weekend, so I couldn't get into any doctors or I didn't want to go to ED. I work in ED, and I knew what was going on. What are they going to do? They're just going to tell me what's going on. And I was sat in a hospital that I work in around people, and I didn't want to deal with it. So Tuesday after, I think it was Australia Day long weekend, the Tuesday after that, because I bled again on the Sunday night, and then the Tuesday I booked a appointment with the Women's and Kids virtual midwife service that they have online, where you basically FaceTime a midwife. Amazing service. I recommend it to everybody. They were absolutely fantastic. They organised my ultrasound. They looked at all my bloods from previous things. They looked at absolutely everything. She listened to everything that I had to say. She sat on the phone while I was super teary, and booked my ultrasound appointment for the Wednesday, so the next day. But she pretty much told me on the Tuesday that, you kind of already know what I'm going to say and what's happening, but, I would prepare for tomorrow to be really not good news. And, I am really sorry that I'm having to tell you that, but it doesn't seem like this, she's like, stranger things have happened, but I don't think this pregnancy is going to end up viable and going to continue to term. I said, yep, kind of figured that. I'm very good at shutting down my emotions in those times and not expressing them to people. However, I was meant to go to work that afternoon, and then rolled up to work and was just an absolute mess. You looked at me and I burst into tears. I ended up on emergency leave, so I didn't go to work for about a month. And then Wednesday, when the appointment rolled around, got it all confirmed, chose to do an expectant miscarriage pathway, which is when you just try and let it pass yourself. And that night I was an absolute mess. I was on the floor, just absolutely sobbing, could not catch my breath. It was absolutely horrible. And it was just like that for days on days. And then ended up with retained products. So I tried to pass it all naturally myself, but nothing sort of happened over about 5 days. So I had to go back to the hospital to get a repeat ultrasound, and they were like, yeah, we've still got product of conception in your uterus, and if we leave it, it could lead to infection. You can potentially keep it in and try and just keep going naturally. But at this point, we were like, well, I don't know when I, technically miscarried, so how long has this product already been in my system? And I don't want to get to that point. So then it was a discussion of, do I take the tablets to induce passing the contents, or do I go for surgery? That was quite confronting, being like, well, how do you basically want to, abort this? Even though, it's not alive and whatnot, but how do you want to go about it? And I'm just sitting there, I don't know. I went with the medication option. That was awful, absolutely horrendous. I probably should have gone the surgical option, because you just get knocked out. They clean out your uterus and your cervix, and then you wake up. You don't have to go through the mental anguish of feeling all of that and seeing it pass. I had to have my retained products caught in a big sterilised jar to have them sent off for testing. And then a week later, I had to go back for another ultrasound to make sure that I had everything passed. So this miscarriage wasn't, and I don't think for any woman, they're very quick processes, but mine was going on for almost a month, trying to sort all of that. And then the last ultrasound that I had, that was the worst day of my life, to have everything confirmed that it was out. And unfortunately, the doctor that was scanning me she didn't mean it in a malicious way, but she used the terminology that I would never have used myself, being told everything looks good, as someone who's just experienced loss. And to me, it doesn't look good to have an empty womb when I was pregnant. So I know exactly the fact that she didn't mean it that way, but that just sent me into the darkest spiral I've been in for years. I've suffered from mental health and battles like that for years, but I've been, great and all that sort of thing for the last 5 or so years. But that night I was not well. I've not been in such a dark place. Someone I know had to come over. I had multiple people basically do we call an ambulance for her? I pretty much just wanted to die. It was horrendous. Took a bunch of pills, not necessarily because I was I'm actually trying to end my life here, but I just didn't care if I woke up. So, it's tomato of how you want to look at that. And one of my friends came over, and the first thing they did was walk in and check that I still had pulse. I did. And then they just didn't leave my side, and I slept for 22 hours straight and couldn't be woken up. And it was awful. That month was absolutely horrible. I wouldn't get out of bed. Dishes weren't done. My blinds didn't come up. My house was dark. I didn't care. At one point I had to have my friends washing my hair. I never thought it would impact me the way that it did, but it really, really did. And I had people in my corner, and I had a loving and supportive and honourable and admirable support system from Victoria to here, everywhere. And I still struggled that deeply. So I can't imagine for the women out there that suffer in silence. I could never.
Wow. I don't even know where to go
from there, to be honest.
It's a lot, and it's very heavy.
It is, and I do thank you so much for being so open about that. And it is obviously still only a couple of months since this has all happened, so it is quite fresh. So, furthering on with the mental health journey there, I from doing a little bit of research around it myself, that feeling is not uncommon. That just, I'm done, I don't care, whatever happens now, and that's very symptomatic of depression and stuff as well. And you mentioned your friends and your network and everything that's helped you through it. What is the mental status around this now for you? A couple of months on.
I think for a long time I actually forgot how close it has actually been since, it's still quite fresh. I had my appointment to confirm everything was, wrapped up in a neat little bow and everything looks good on the 12th of February. And it's the 21st or something of March or whatnot today. So that's only just over, 4-5 weeks. It was about 6 weeks ago. It's not even 2 months ago that I had to have that final appointment, about 2 months since I started bleeding. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not that long of a time. So considering, I think everybody thinks that I've done very well. My mental state now is much better. I think after I had a 22-hour sleep, I think my body actually needed it. I don't necessarily think that what I did was good, and I'm not necessarily saying that, in order to heal, you should take a whole bunch of pills and just hope that you don't wake up. But I think that my body needed a rest. It needed a rest that it did not get since the day I found out I was pregnant. I was constantly working on growing that child, and then also on top of that, the mental load of, your life turning upside down literally in the space of 2 minutes. Was wild. And while I'd accepted that, I'd also accepted that my life was drastically going to change, and I was potentially going to be, a single mum, or, what was going on. Because at the same time that, I was finding out I was pregnant and going through all of that, during the miscarriage, I also went through a breakup. So I went through a lot of loss in a very short amount of time. Not even 2 months, but in a month, I went through the loss of my child and my partner. So it was a very heavy time, and I think my body needed sleep and it needed rest, because I woke up after 22 hours of being half unconscious and just got up, said nothing to my friend that was with me, and went and made a coffee, grabbed a notebook that I had, a pen, and went and actually sat outside for the first time in about a month. And started journaling and writing, and just literally turn around and said out loud, I'm not doing this anymore. I need to put this grief somewhere. And if that's a pen to paper, writing all of my emotions out, then that's what we're going to do. I opened my blinds for the first time in a couple of weeks, and I literally sat outside and had a coffee and just went, we're not doing this. I've been through too much in my life to let this necessarily win. Hardest thing I've had to go through by far. But I think I just woke up and I just went, no, we're not doing that. We're going to use this for something bigger and greater than myself. So from that day, I knew that I wanted to do something with it. I don't know what it was ever going to be. I was like, I don't know if it's going to be advocacy. I don't know if it's going to be talking about it on platforms like this. I didn't know what it was going to be, but I used that moment to basically give me strength every single day to continue on, basically, and then use that in my practice as a nurse. I've had multiple women come up to my window to book on an ED, bleeding and thinking that they're having a miscarriage. I had a 19-year-old that I had to tell 2 days after I'd gone back to work that she had more than likely miscarried, and I had just stopped bleeding myself. Which, yes, is hard, and you could argue, you shouldn't have done that, you probably should have got somebody else to, and those sorts of things. It's made me a better nurse, if we're going to be completely honest. You've got to find silver linings in something, and saying to people, women who have experienced loss, well, at least you can get pregnant. As much as it might sound like a positive compliment to say to someone, it's actually not. It's actually really hurtful. It kind of invalidates the fact that I was pregnant and that I was a mum and did have that. So I basically just used all of the pain that I got and then turned it into strength, basically. So my mental state is so much better. That's not saying I don't have bad days. I'm not going to sit here and say, I'm fantastic all of the time.
No one is as it is,
No,
mate,
absolutely. So I'm still set off or triggered by little things, or every now and then I'll just wake up and go, I had a miscarriage the other week. That's still, really shit. Yeah. And I'm still processing that, and then I get up and go to work and have a average day, or I have to, look after a 3-day-old baby, and it brings up things that I haven't yet, processed, or I'm still working through. So yeah, you have a bad day any day of the week, but then you just have to carry it. And I just have decided to not let it fester. I'm going to try and
process
use it
and
as something.
deal with it, sort of thing. Yeah, and I think that's so powerful. And, we do both know quite a bit about each other's journeys and trauma and things like that. And that lived experience piece is so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think... And you touched on it a couple of times there, just on general bedside manner that can happen, and it's not uncommon, even when Em and I were in the first stages, our doctor basically said, when a test was done a bit too early or something, so there were some levels that weren't quite right, and it was, at least you can get pregnant. That's exactly what you said.
Oh.
And it's well, no, I am pregnant, we are pregnant, this is important. Yes, you might see a few of these every day or whatever, but this is still someone's life.
It's yeah, there needs to be some humility, and there's a lot of like do's and don'ts on like, well, people, and I think this is also why we don't talk about it, is because I'm going to sit here and be like, well, that's not really a nice thing to say, so then people might go, well, then what do we say? And it's like, okay, I get that, but you know, if someone's brother dies, or if someone's family member dies, you don't say, oh, well, you can just get a new one. Like, you don't say, oh, you can just buy a new cat.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same sort of thing. It makes you feel the same way. Like, it would be seen as disrespectful. So it's like, well, don't say that. And even some of my, like, best and closest friends said to me, well, at least we know that you can get pregnant. We thought that you weren't going to be able to. I understand that it's coming from a place of love and that sort of thing. But one of my best friends literally said to me, she said, you know, once you pointed out to me that it was actually quite hurtful to you, she sat there and she reflected on it. And she's like, yeah, no, that's not something that you'd want to hear in that moment. She's like, oh, I'm so sorry that I've said that. So then when other people have said to her, like, oh, at least, you know, Lyss knows that she can get pregnant, she goes, no, that's not really fair though, is it? Like, she's still, it sort of takes away from her loss though, doesn't it?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
It kind of made it, you know, just think about how that could make someone feel. And I like that by me actually addressing that and not just sitting there being like, well, that made me uncomfortable, but I'm just not going to say anything. Like, no, let's actually have a discussion, because the things that you can say to people to make them feel better or to make them feel valid in their loss are so much more than like the 4 common phrases, or at least we know you can get pregnant, or at least you were really early on, or things that are actually quite invalidating to hear.
Yeah,
Quick break, because if you're serious about mental strength and physical recovery, you need to hear this. Mind Over Matter Practice down in Victor Harbor isn't just your average wellness spot. This place is built for people who want to train their response to stress and not just escape it. They've got guided ice baths, private infrared and steam saunas, float tank therapy, hyperbaric oxygen sessions, and even brain training tools, all under the one roof. Whether you're chasing peak performance or clawing your way back from burnout, this is where you need to reset and rebuild. As mentioned earlier, mention my name, Trav, and they'll knock 15% off of any treatment. Go to mindovermatterpractice.com.au and back yourself. Now, let's get back to it.
Yeah, and you know, people think they're doing the right thing because they've heard other people say it.
Good.
And like your mate did, it's like, oh, when we actually think about what we're saying, there is that unintentional effect. And it's similar to, you know, when you're walking down the street, like, say, you know, you in your 3rd trimester or whatnot, and everyone wants to put their hands on your belly and stuff like that. I think it's just...
How is that normal? Like, how have we adapted to think that's normal? It's so bizarre.
And it's, you know, it's just what people do because they think it's like, this is what everyone does. It's exciting, but it's, you know, there is that, hang on, I'm still a person.
Yeah,
my
I'm
person
still valid. First. Baby, like, second, kind of, like, talk to me first. And,
I am, well, in the female's case, I am the, you know, protector and grower of the baby, you know, like we are one, and it's not, you know, if you're experiencing a loss, it's a loss of that part of you. If you're protecting your pregnant self, you are protecting a part of you, like,
so once you start to actually talk about it, and even you probably sitting here probably wouldn't have necessarily thought that saying, well, at least, you know, you can get pregnant would have necessarily been a bad thing to say to me, or, you know, that sort of thing. But
the only reason I knew was because our doctor said
your doctor has exactly. So it's like, I'm not, you know, going to sit here and basically shit on anyone who does it, but I just want to have the conversation about how it can actually look and how it can come across, and if that's what my loss has had to, you know, end up doing, then that's what I'm going to do, is just open that discussion. I'm not going to have a crack at anyone. I'm just going to say, hey, like, there's other things that we can say. There's other things that we can do. And, you know, that's what I'm here to do.
So let's talk a bit about that. What are some of the ways that people can support, you know, whether it's their partner or a relative or even just a friend going through this sort of thing? Yeah,
so for me, I think the biggest thing was just because even myself, I blamed myself for the loss. I remember going through a really tough time when I was still pregnant before I knew that I was miscarrying, and I was walking down my hallway absolutely sobbing, clutching my stomach, begging this child not to leave me, because there was a lot of other things going on, a lot of external factors, and I was like, I'm going to have to do this on my own. This is the hardest thing that I'm ever going to have to do. And was just like, please don't leave me, and was quite literally clutching my stomach, begging this child not to, you know, leave, or for my body to fail. So then there was a lot of like almost self-resentment after that. and I blamed myself, and I said to people like, I deserve this, I've done terrible things, I've been a bad person, so I deserve to have lost this is my punishment. And that's such a valid way of thinking in that moment, but it's so wrong. So I can guarantee you that pretty much every woman that's experienced this loss felt that it was their fault and that it was deserved. So making sure that even if they haven't said it out loud, I said it to people that I felt like I deserved it, saying to people around you, you know, if you know that they're experiencing loss, this isn't your fault. You did not do anything wrong. This is a really sucky situation and I'm so sorry. Literally just saying that, because there's not a lot that you're going to be able to say to make it feel better. You're not. There's not a lot of things that I'm going to be able to say or do myself that's going to make it feel better or change the situation. But just making sure that people know that you're there when you know, like when you found out, does change everything. I had my friends basically over daily just to check in. I had my friends, you know, they did my dishes. My best friend washed my hair because I lost my products and I was actually in the shower and passed I passed my gestational sac, so my baby. I was in the shower and I just completely collapsed and I was no longer able to function, and my best friend washed my hair because I was actually supposed to go to a birthday that night. She washed my hair for me. My friend from Victoria and her organised basically a care package, like just little like of all my favourite snacks, and came over and laid in bed with me and watched movies with me and didn't make me feel like I was a burden. Like it didn't. I already was feeling really crappy, and I wasn't being a good friend because in that moment I was trying to survive. There was no way that I could help somebody else in their life when I could barely keep myself together. But they stepped up and they made me feel like laying in bed for 3 days and not getting up wasn't the worst thing in the world, that I wasn't, you know, lazy and all these things. And I think it's just showing up for the people that are around you and saying that they're sorry and saying that, you know, you feel however you need to feel. And to be completely honest, I went on, like, I spent a lot of time on the booze once I found out that I was miscarrying, and it was a way of coping, and it's not healthy. But by talking to women that have also gone through this, it's actually really ironic that absolutely every single one of them did the exact same thing. The first pit stop was the bottle-o and got a bottle or two of wine because it was just like you just needed something.
Just to numb. Yeah, it makes sense. It's that escape, isn't it? Because you're constantly dealing with this thing while all of the other pressures around you are happening. And life still has to go on too. There's still that piece. And I suppose, like, looking at it from a grief perspective holistically, something you sort of said but didn't say there, which I think is really important, is, like, meeting people where they're at with their grief and not passing judgment over that grieving
100%,
process. Because, you know, for you, in that case, it looked like a couple of weeks of, you know, not moving for 3 days, and for someone else, it might look like a 40-kilometre run. You know, people have their different ways of dealing with things, and there's no right or wrong. I mean, you know, when it's different when we're talking about escapism with something like alcohol and stuff. And granted, like you said, it's not the healthiest way to do it. No. But, you know, when you're in that situation,
You are going to turn to unhealthy mechanisms, and I'm not going to sit here and say don't do it, because that's just hypocritical.
If you can find something else that helps you, absolutely.
It's not like I was on the piss every day. It's not like I put myself into a really bad, you know, alcoholic state. But, you know, absolutely, if you've got other outlets, 100%. But there is also still nothing necessarily wrong with just coping to the bare minimum level that you can.
And tonight I'm going to write myself off or whatever it is.
I can't sleep. A couple glasses of wine will knock off that overthinking, that pain that's constantly going on in my head, and I'll sleep. Like, it's just things like that. And once I started talking about it to all these other, like, women and realised that they were in the same thing, they were like, we were pretty much pissed for like 2 weeks. Because they were just like, we just like needed it. And, you know, I think there's a lot of, you know, shame or judgment that go on that. And I think that, you know, it needs to sort of, you know, cut out in those sorts of things, because grief does do amazing things to your brain and to your body, and those sort of, like, the pregnancy alone completely altered my brain chemistry. But then the loss and going through the grief of a breakup and then a miscarriage at the same time has completely altered everything. And yeah, I think you need to meet the people around you at the levels that they are, and they just need to feel loved and supported. So, you know, validating the fact that I was a mum, and I keep saying was a mum, but last night I was talking to my best friend about some stuff on Snapchat video. We're just having a chat, and she goes, no, Lyss, like, you are a mum. Like, you are always going to be a mum because you were pregnant. You grew something, however little or for however long that was. Like, you're still a mum. Like, you don't need to use everything as past tense just because. Like, if that child was 12 years old, we wouldn't say, oh, you were a mum. Like, you know what I mean? So I think having that validation of your friends and that sort of stuff is the biggest thing, and your family as well is the biggest, most important thing that you can have. Like, there was nothing that they could say that was going to make the pain go away, but just telling me that I was loved and supported and just held in a time where I was so fragile is literally all you can do.
Yeah. And like, that obviously goes a long way, like you've said, and like, shout out to your mates too.
Absolutely. They've done a fantastic job. I've thanked every single one of them, like, since. And then also the fact that a lot of, you know, my mates sort of thought about, well, what about the father? You know, how is he doing, and how is this, and all that sort of thing. And I was just kind of like, I didn't really think about it. It's not that I was like, well, he wasn't the one who lost the baby. But it was kind of like, I didn't actually really think of it either, because I was in such a pit. And we kind of had, like, just as a general sort of conversation, I think that it is still important that you do check on your, like, male mates or the fathers of the babies that have been lost, because it is different for women because we're physically growing it and we're physically feeling those changes and all those sorts of things. But I still think that, you know, men's mental health isn't really talked about, or it's better now, but I still think that there's a long way to go in that space. And I think that, you know, they lost something as well, so they might be okay and they're absolutely fine and they're being the best partner they can be. But I think it's still nice to just check in and go, and how are you doing? Like, are you all good? Like, or how are you going with supporting Lyss? Like, are you a bit fatigued? Do you need me to do anything for you to make the load easier on you? And just actually checking in with your mates that have also gone through that loss is important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you've touched on that, because, and it's not necessarily just with the men either, like you said yourself, and in your job too, you've got to put on that mask. You've got to put on that face. And so I think it's super important, when you're approaching people normally anyway, just not to judge anyone on anything, because you don't know what's going on.
No idea.
But like, if you do know something has happened with that person and you know that they seem alright or whatnot, that check-in's still super important.
It's still valid, even if that person's fine.
You know, like, and especially in your line of work too, where, like, you know, you might have a brave face on and then suddenly you have to encounter something like this, and it's like, okay, maybe I need someone to check in with me beforehand so I can let it out and go into that situation as well. Yeah. This has been really, really informative, and I do wonder as well now, and like you mentioned, you're single and that sort of thing as well. What are your views on motherhood now going forward? Like, you've had this experience now. What do you want to have kids in the future again, or
so I, with my PCOS and things like that, knowing that kids was always going to be a little bit difficult for me, was always hard but accepted, because I found out when I was 17. I'm 28 now, so I've had time to accept that it was going to be difficult, and that's absolutely fine. I did almost force myself into accepting the fact that I was never going to have kids, and then accepted the fact that, I don't even want kids. I've almost gaslit myself into believing that I didn't want kids, but I absolutely still did want kids, and then was pregnant and just went, well, I'm a mum now, that's all fine. And now I still do. I still do want kids. I'm just terrified, because I think what no one will say, that I have said multiple times, is now that I have had that one miscarriage, that one loss, I'm petrified of it happening again. And I'm very much, I'll tell my support system, but I'm also so scared to tell people, because then you do go through that loss again and have to announce the loss and those sorts of things. So I think that my fear of being pregnant or being a mum is non-existent. was born to be a mum. I know I'm going to be a fantastic mum when it is my time to be one with a earthside child. But I think the underlying scariest part is having to go through loss again, because it quite nearly killed me. It quite literally nearly took my life along with it. And I kind of just wanted to be with my baby at that time. Even though it was only, a clump of cells or whatever you want to say, like, that was still my child, and I'm absolutely terrified of having to go through it again. So I think the idea of motherhood is stronger now more than ever after going through the pregnancy and the loss. And it is something that I absolutely want more than anything. And it has completely changed how I am after it as well. Obviously, I'm 28, single, go out, have fun with my friends, party. But now I'm kind of like, I'm out and I'm like, this isn't actually really, I'm doing it because it's someone's birthday, or it's, we've had a couple of wines, we'll just go to the bar and we'll have a drink. And, I'm having fun. I'm trying to live my life as a 28-year-old being like, okay, well, I had a really bad loss and I had a really hard time dealing with that. I'm not just going to sit at home and mope about it, and I'm going to continue to live my life. I'm not going to let it control me. But it's also one of those things where I'm like, I just don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it's shifted my brain that much where I'm like, this just actually isn't really that much fun. I would rather be pregnant and be starting my life on that next chapter almost type thing. So it's completely changed, like, who I almost want it, like, more desperately sort of now.
Yeah.
Because I've had it.
And I could almost, pinpoint, I guess, the moment it maybe changed in a certain way for you was when you picked up that journal and started journaling there. Because when you were talking about it before, it's like this became a purpose for you. Like, it became a why. Like, I've been through this and now I'm going to use this to help educate and support other women and families and things like that. So, it's amazing. When you think, like, you get the job, you get the house, you get all of that sorted, and it's like, okay, what now sort of thing. But almost having that clear passion there is so powerful, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And, just on that, the point you made about being, like, petrified of having another experience like this, like, that would be such a real feeling for everyone.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I know of women who have had back-to-back miscarriages. I think they had 2 while they were actively trying to get pregnant, then got pregnant and managed to carry to term for their, like, it would have been their, so they had 1 baby, they had 2 miscarriages, and they had their 4th, so it would have been their 4th pregnancy. But only 2 had made it to term.
Yeah.
And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, every woman that probably would have gone through a miscarriage at some point is then having to get pregnant, wanting to get pregnant again. Not has to, but wants to get pregnant again, and then having that fear in the back of their head.
Well, you're never not going to remember that, are you?
No, and it's stress is already not good on the female body when you're trying to conceive and when you're trying to grow a fetus, and then you're already going to have that in the back of your head being like, and everything's going to, like, that time, cramps are normal during pregnancy, that didn't feel the same. Is that this? Is that this? Is that spotting? Is that bleeding? And there's so many different types of miscarriages as well, where it's so scary, because you can have, like, a missed miscarriage, you can have a molar pregnancy, you can have a chemical pregnancy, so you will test on a piss stick and it'll tell you that you're pregnant, but you're actually not. Your body's basically tricked you. And you can have an ectopic pregnancy, which can be, like, it can be life-threatening. So it's a terrifying experience as is, but then you add on the previous loss that you might have experienced, and then it's just this whole big tumbleweed that just, you can't ever really sort of explain it.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to the bit we were saying before with people thinking they're saying the right thing, where they might say, like, oh, well, you never know unless you try. Yeah. It's like, I've already sort of thought that, like, that's kind of obvious to me, but that doesn't make this feel irrational.
It's also opened my eyes a little bit on, and I've never really been the one to be like, oh, so when are you having kids? Or you're married for 3 months, you're having kids. I've never been the one to do that, but I do notice that a lot of people do push that, and it's like, how do you know that they didn't just go through a loss? How do you know that they're not actually currently miscarrying? And you're asking them, like, oh, so when are you having kids? So it's kind of like the discussion around it does need to change a little bit. Just because, again, like you said, you have absolutely no idea what someone's going through. And I think that while you might mean something really well-intended, it actually comes across as very ill-intended. Yeah,
it can be very condescending or, like, just flippant. it's not genuine when you're just saying something that you think you're meant to say, sort of thing. And it's, people do need to be more aware of this. And I think it is improving. And I think, I see a lot of mums and stuff on Facebook who are outwardly promoting this sort of thing, which is great. It's just one of those things that's going to have to evolve over time.
Yeah, it will very slowly just have to sort of, change. It's just, I think that it's also very hard to talk about your own experience when, you probably don't want to talk about it, you don't want to relive it, and you don't want to re-experience it. It's re-traumatising yourself almost. And I'm not saying that every woman needs to talk about their loss. And I can absolutely relate to the idea of seeing people on their second babies, their third babies, even their first babies, and baby showers, and all of these things that are going on, first birthdays, and all of those things that you see on social media. And it's just another reminder on certain days when you're already a little bit low that that's not you. So it can be even harder because you start to put yourself into you're almost isolating yourself away from people because you're just constantly surrounded by reminders that that's not for you right now. And maybe it did hit me so hard because it was my first one. Maybe it might not hit me for my second or my third because I'll know what to expect. But for a lot of girls that I know that it was their first loss, it has hit them and they've had to leave off of social media and they can't talk about it because it's too hard for them, and that's fine as well. But just being aware of what to say and how you say things, and just knowing that, people are putting on masks a lot of the time and you just have no clue, and to just be aware that what you can say can hurt people without you realizing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's at the end of the day, we're all people. Like, we're all just walking each other home. We all experience emotions the same way. Like, different circumstances cause different emotions and different levels of these things, but at the end of the day, we're all just one.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a bit more about the piece there that you mentioned so rightly about the women that don't necessarily want to talk but want to feel supported. You mentioned you've started a page.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so when I was in my deep, dark, dreary droves of depression, the quadruple Ds or whatever you want to call it, because it was a very dark time, I just thought to myself, I'm going to do something with this. I don't know what the hell it's going to be, but I'm going to do something with this. And then I woke up and put my pen to paper and said, I'm just going to put the grief somewhere. And I thought, well, the grief doesn't necessarily have to just live in my house, in my journal, in my book, and with the people that are closest to me that have lived it with me. It can actually be an outward support. So if these women don't want to talk about it, but, want to know that they're not alone, that's what my page is for. So I just, the other day, was sitting there and I was like, I'm not really doing anything else. Now's just as good a time as any. And I just started a page on Instagram called The Grief Space. What did I call it? The Grief Diaries. I've just done it again. I've done it again. Because it was originally, I was going to be like, the grief space. Like, I'm making space for grief. And then I was like, no, I'm going to call it The Grief Diaries because it's involving, like, my journal and my diary of sort of what's happened. And, there's probably plenty of pages out on Instagram and things like that. But they're probably just not relatable because you don't know them. I'm not a friend of a friend that you can relate to. I'm very raw and authentic in my speaking, in the way that I present myself, and I want that page to be it. I don't want it to be this thing where it's like, we're just educating just on this and making things light and pink and pretty, and
let's post a meme and
no, I actually wanted to be very raw with my experience of what actually happened. So I think it was Wednesday this week, the Grief Diaries literally went live on Insta, and I've done a couple of posts on there. And just before, when I was in the car before I came in here, I said that I was coming on the podcast with you, and then was going to give them a story time of like what sort of actually happened as well, because the full story hasn't actually been posted on the Grief Diaries yet. So that's what the space is going to be. It is going to be about educating people on how to talk about it, or what to say, or what the best things to say are. And it's not going to be like a guide or anything like you have to say this, but it's just going to give people hopefully a platform that they feel safe enough to go, I'm not alone. And that might make someone feel a lot less than what I did. Like, they might not get to the point of popping a whole bunch of pills to try to sleep. They might, if it gives someone some understanding to pass on to somebody else, or if it gives them a little bit of hope that it doesn't all end when your baby's life ends, then that's like all that space needs to do.
Yeah, and that's so powerful, and you know, something that I'm very passionate about, and what you're really tapping into here as well is that vulnerability piece.
Yeah.
Because, like you say, there could be so many different education pages out there about it, but there's nothing necessarily out there that says it's 10 o'clock at night, everyone's asleep, and I'm struggling.
Yeah.
Like, you know, that's not there, and so I really applaud you for putting that out there to this space, this community that will come to you, because I know it will, and it's really, really powerful what you're doing. So I will put the details for the page into the show notes and everything as well.
Thank you.
Is there anything you want to leave us with today?
I just want to say that, you know, experiencing grief in any capacity is one of the hardest things that anyone will ever go through. I've never really experienced a lot of it myself. I'm quite blessed in the fact that a lot of my family are still alive and kicking, and I never thought this miscarriage would affect me the way that it did. So if there is like anybody that does watch this or, you know, listen to this and does feel what I've said resonates with them, like please reach out to, whether it's someone like me that you have no idea who I am, but I understand and I've lived it, then please do. If you know, can reach out to anybody, please do. And sometimes you just need to talk it out, and you don't need anybody to give you advice. And I didn't need anybody to tell me what to do, and I was not going to listen to them. I lost a lot of friendships during that time because they just didn't show up. So just talk it out with people that, you know, you love and that you trust. And if you are supporting someone that's going through it, whether it's friend, family, partner, whoever, you just show up. Just show up, and just, please know that, you know, you're not alone, and the pain will eventually subside, and it will become something else.
Yeah, it'll become different, you know. It'll become like we said before, a lived experience.
Yeah, it'll always live in you, but it'll just live differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And something I like to, especially with grief, that you know, just in general with things like when you are overthinking and ruminating about these sorts of things as well, you can't always control your first thought, but you can control your second.
Yeah.
And so what I think, you know, when we're talking about grief, that sort of means is not only just like not dismissing your first thought, but like accepting that for what it is, and then using your second thought to go, okay, I recognise that I'm feeling this way.
Yeah.
What am I going to do now? Like, what can I do to help my situation?
Yeah, absolutely. And if that is crawling into bed and not leaving bed and kind of giving yourself that rest, please do it. Trying to force yourself to be like, oh, well, I'm just going to shake the thought off and go and push through my day, you will eventually crumble. It will hit you harder. So if you have that first thought and then you're sitting on it and you go, oh, yep, that thought's there. And then you're like, oh, I really just don't feel like going to coffee with that person. I really do I really need to mop the floors today?
Yeah, does my routine need to...
Is it like, in that time, like, please actually put yourself first. There is nothing wrong with doing that when you're dealing with grief and loss and heartbreak and all of the pain that comes with that. So you just have to be so kind to yourself, and that's a big thing that I learned, and that's really what I need other people to do to them, like, for themselves, and for people surrounding that to also do for their supported other. Yeah,
it is that like that self-kindness piece, and also like giving yourself permission to be in that space, and then realising too that everything else is going to be there.
Everything else
afterwards.
Is just noise, really. The dishes don't need to be done today. You know, everything else does just become noise when you are trying to just survive through the day.
Yeah, you've got... you could have all the problems in the world until your health, be that physical or mental,
correct, and that
are a problem. That's your only
priority.
one. Yeah. Amazing. Well, I think we wrap it up there.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming on and just sharing everything. Like, you've been so vulnerable and so open and honest in a way that I don't think many people would have heard, especially about this topic before. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me.
And I will, as I said, I'll put all of Lyss's details, the ones she wants, shared anyway.
Yeah, please don't post my home address.
Tax file number. All of that will be in the show notes. You'll also find me at The Journey of Trav on Instagram, and Trav Dittmar across YouTube and TikTok. The podcast is also on YouTube as well as Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thanks for tuning in this week, legends, and thank you for Mind Over Matter Practice for sponsoring this episode, and I will see you next week. Cheers.
Thanks, guys.
G'day legends, thank you so much for tuning into the show. Just a reminder for where to follow me on social media. I'm the Journey of Trav on Instagram, Trav Dittmar on YouTube, trav.dittmar on TikTok. And if you are listening to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please give me a 5-star rating and leave a review as well. That would go a long way to getting this podcast out there. And if you are watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff as well. Thanks heaps legends, and I'll see you next time.